Welcome to another edition of Banter by the Blender, a show that's supposed to be funny, but really isn't. I'm still working on that part, so we do have blenders though. That's an important part, even though I can't actually find the blender part of this. This is an official edition of Banter by the Blender. Today's episode is something that's, again, not very funny, but I would like to share some of the thoughts and feelings that I've been having about diet. Once again, not funny. But there are some things I would like to share about my experience with it and my understanding of why people may choose certain diets, and also the self-awareness of why I've chosen my diet, plant-based whole foods, which is great for blending, particularly fruit smoothies in the morning. That's a great way to go. So there's a couple factors that influence our decision making on what diet we choose. There's two major ones that I want to share in this and then go into a couple more details about it. The first is that we make our decisions as humans emotionally first. We make decisions by emotions first and then justify with logic. That's the default as a human being. We feel something, we want something, and then we kind of look for ways to get it. And one way to look for ways to get it is to justify it. It's like, I want this, and it's okay to have it. That's part of the human condition, and it's something we do with our diet a lot. In different ways. Sometimes we know it's bad for us, but we'll eat it anyway, and other times we'll look for research that says it's good for us, or like focus on that. So that's definitely a factor in diet, looking for a diet that fulfills our emotional desire for something and then kind of backs it up with some logic. So we may even agree with a scientist or a researcher who says something even if it's against scientific consensus, just because it fulfills this emotional decision that we've made. I am definitely not I'm susceptible to this, and I'll share that as my belief system. I came to emotional first. I am appalled by factory farms. Possibly the least funny topic to talk about in a video that's supposed to include the word banter in the title. But that's where this diet shifted, where I was like, I emotionally cannot stand that humans fund this, and I don't want to, so I'm going to stop, and I'm going to look for research that supports that. So the other thing that's a major factor is comfort and what our tribe accepts. So growing up, we are exposed to certain types of food, and we like those, if they made us feel good for whatever reason, then as we get older and in the future we'll seek out those foods as kind of like a comfort food, or what we believe is acceptable. And that's true with like tribalism, like the food that the tribe eats, we get used to that food, it's safe, it doesn't make us sick, so we kind of start to crave it. A good example is somebody's born in another country, like India for example, and then move to another country like America. They will crave some Indian food, and they'll go out and get Indian food to fulfill that craving. Now, is that the human body saying that it needs Indian food? No, because I don't have that craving. So there's psychological stuff going on with diet like that. And another major factor is like, does society allow it? Like, is it okay in society to do things? Like, is it okay to drink the fluid expelled by another mammal just as like a morning drink? Like, pour it in your coffee, In our society it is. But if you could imagine if you went into like a future society or another society that's like plant-based, and you took like milk fluid from another mammal and put it in a glass and then like drank it, people would be like, oh my gosh, what is wrong with you? Don't drink that stuff. That's for baby cows. I mean, where's the baby cow that was supposed to be drinking that? I mean, are you kidnapping baby cows here or what? The whole thing is absurd, but socially acceptable. So, same thing with animal flesh. Like, you go into a plant-based culture and you have like a piece of a dead animal, stick it and burn off all the the bacteria that would make you sick, and then eat it like a I don't know, a monster, let's just say. In society that's fine. It tastes great, it's full of nutrients and stuff, so that's fine. But in a different society, that is like an atrocity. But times have changed. Like go back even 100 years, and people didn't get to choose their diet. We weren't talking about what was right and wrong. We were talking about how do you survive. And if you're in a survival situation, you eat that dead animal, and you drink that cow pus drink that's full of fat, saturated fat, and nutrients and stuff. It's got some benefits to it if you're, if you drink it. So it's got a lot of negative health effects too, which you can go into. So those are the two major factors that influence our diet. And then I just want to touch on a couple health things that I get because I'm plant-based whole food. That's what I believe is the best diet for the human body. And I come upon people who believe that eating animal products is the best food for their body or something like that. And so there's often a couple of there's scientific consensus, and we live in the 21st century. Our science is pretty good. If 90% of experts agree on something, that's scientific consensus. To believe against scientific consensus because one author or one person wrote a book about something or other, you're getting into dangerous territory, in that case, and you gotta look at you gotta be careful. So it's important to go with scientific consensus for the majority of time. So I'm just gonna talk about scientific consensus. Of course, I'm not an expert, like I've said a million times. So in a way, I'm gonna talk about it sloppily, but let's cover a couple of ideas behind the plant-based diet and how it is more healthy than eating dead animal flesh, as well as the milk expelled from a mother cow that would normally go to the cow's child, who has been separated and is going to live a life of horror for the rest of its existence. All right, so the first is fiber. My favorite. How could anybody be against fiber? It's like the chewy, awful thing that's inside so many plants that is so good for the stomach. There's a lot of, it's very rare to come upon a dietitian that says, don't eat fiber. I think all healthy diets say fruits and vegetables, fiber like crazy. FDA recommends 30 grams of fiber. And that takes a little bit of effort. You got to eat some, things that came from the earth to get there. So fiber is great. Plant-based diet, it tends to be high in fiber, and that's really good for the gut biome. Fiber is like hotels. Like if you ate hotels for a gut biome, it goes in your stomach, and all of the bacteria is living in the fiber and dancing in the fiber, having little fiber dance parties in there. And also what they do is they take the waste that's produced and their own dead bodies, and they stick it in the basement of the hotels, and then the hotels and the fiber get expelled. So if you don't eat enough fiber, those toxins that the bacteria and the dead bacteria and stuff can go into your bloodstream. My experience of that is I get headaches if there isn't enough fiber in my system. So low fiber has a lot of problems, but the main thing is it supports a healthy gut. So that should be non-controversial. So lots of fiber in a plant-based diet, and most carnivore diets like keto are high fiber too. So, that's not controversial. That's just scientific consensus, and also the experience of so many people. Just fiber is not a controversial, great quality of plant-based. Next is the topic of cholesterol or animal fats, and what are the effects. And it's scientific consensus that cholesterol causes it causes heart disease, or the clogging of arteries. That's comes from animal products. The human body produces cholesterol, produces all the cholesterol needed. We don't need any outside cholesterol, and it's scientific consensus. If you go to the doctor, if your cholesterol is high, it's because you've eaten it from an animal. And the doctor will either say, if it's a good doctor, stop eating those animals, or they'll say, here's some medicine that will lower your cholesterol. So that's just a very common thing, because so many people die of heart disease from eating dead animal that lots of people know this. Like, cholesterol clogs the arteries. If you go to the doctor and your cholesterol's high, they'll say you're in the risk of getting a heart attack. And I would like to point out how interesting it is, spiritually and literally, that if a person eats a lot of animals, they die of heart disease. Okay, so that's a good indicator. I also want to add, like, lots of people eat tons of meat and they live until they're like 60 or 70. So the body's resilient like crazy. There's ways that, and also if you switch from eating animals to a plant-based, you can flush out all the cholesterol, all the clogging that's happening in your arteries. That's pretty great. So, I mean, I was eating meat as a child, and then switched to plant-based after my emotional discovery of what people are funding in those animal factory farms. So hard to believe that's happening. And people who say they're good, like people who go to church, then go home and fund a factory farm, a torture, slave resource death center that is so atrocious that if you spent a period of time there, you would be crying and it would be awful and the smell would be terrible and all of these animals are suffering. So that's the emotional stuff I'm talking about. It's very convincing. I think everyone should take a tour. I mean, they lock the doors. They don't want people going in because they make money from that. They're the death machine of the world, so they don't want me saying this. But you will get heart disease if you eat it. You may get, I should say, you're in an increased likelihood of getting heart disease. The other major disease that is scientific consensus, colon cancer. That's why they say meat is a carcinogen. It's linked. People eat lots of meat, they have a much higher likelihood of colon cancer. Okay, that's just, all of the cancer research organizations say that. That's not controversial. And that metaphorically, the heart disease is like you don't have a big enough heart to care, so you get heart disease. Colon cancer is you don't give a crap, so you get colon cancer. So it's awful. These things you don't have to worry about if you eat plants, and that's why I'm such an advocate of it. I mean, it's complicated. If somebody eats a plant-based diet and they're like, oh, I'm tired, or I don't know, I don't feel good, well, you're doing it wrong. That's how the world works. Like, you do something wrong, it's not gonna feel good. So it's complicated. I'm sitting here saying like plant-based is the best, but there's a lot more you have to research in this, and I really just wanted to talk about like the tribal aspect, the psychological aspect, and just a couple of just those little scientific consensus things that are all part of it. I mean, if you look at the humans that we all were born into this amazingly flexible body that can survive just so much stuff. I mean, clearly, human ancestors survived on meat. Let's just say that. They didn't have a choice, and the wolves that ate the meat, the ones that survived and got strong and big brains and like, let's go for it. But now we get a choice. And if you look at before humans were making fire and sharp tools to kill animals, we have a common ancestor with chimpanzees, bonobos, and gorillas. They all converge on the evolutionary line to an ancestor that no longer exists, like a shared ancestor that was plant-based. They eat plants. I mean, and we know that because of our stomachs, because gorillas, plant-based, bonobos and chimpanzees, primarily plant-based. There's some weird stuff they do. There's some weird stuff that humans do. And a lot has changed over the past 100 million years, because you have to go back 100 million years or more. That's just a big fat number I'm throwing out there. Till you get to this creature that was like very like monkey-like, almost human-looking, eating plants like crazy and getting around, like climbing stuff. That's where we came from, plant-based, 100%. But do what you need to survive. Consult doctors and stuff. Just wanted to kind of cover some health stuff on this episode of Banter by Half of a Blender.